Hey, this is Dino, and today I want to walk you through really quickly the JSON Threat Protection policy that's available in Apigee X and Hybrid. So I've signed into console.cloud.google.com. I've selected my project. I can use the left-hand side nav bar to find Apigee. Select that, and I want to look at my API proxies. I've already imported and deployed an API proxy that is using the JSON Threat Protection policy. We can have a look at it and I'll show you what it does. There's really just one endpoint. This is a loopback proxy, which means requests being sent in and handled by this proxy. Apigee does not propagate those to an upstream system, does not proxy them to an upstream system. It's really just handling those requests inside the proxy itself and returning canned responses. And that's going to make sense for our purposes here, which is just for demonstrating this policy. So we've really got one interesting conditional flow, and that is a post on /T1. The first thing it does is it looks for the correct media type. It's got to be application JSON in order for the JSON threat protection policy to be effective. So we're going to have a conditional raise fault in there. If it does not see the application JSON header in content type, then we're going to send back a fault. If it is a post and it is JSON, then we're going to run this JSON threat protection policy. What does that look like? Well, we just set a bunch of controls. First thing we got to do is specify the source. That is what it's going to check. Normally that's going to be in the request. It's less common that you would want to scan for threats from a response, but I suppose you could do that if you wanted to. So we specify the source message, and this JSON threat protection policy is going to look at the request content, the content of this message for any threats, and what would constitute a threat, or what would constitute exceeding the limits. Well, one is the number of items allowed in any array. Another is the depth of container relationship in a JSON object. So if we got more than 4 levels, we're going to throw a fault here. The number of entries at any one level. If we got more than 5 of those, we're going to throw a fault. The length of an identifier or the length of a value, a string value in the payload. So any of those things, exceeding any of those things would cause a fault. And now maybe I'd like to show you it working. So we're going to start a debug session in case we want to look at this a little bit later. Now I've got a tool set up where I can invoke the API proxy from within this tool, and I'll just show you a couple different examples of this. The first thing I'll do is I'll send a get in, and this tool allows me to specify the verb and the path and maybe headers and payload and so on. But the first one is really simple. I just send a get in, and as expected, I'm getting a message back. The proxy saying, "Hey, you gotta send a post. We don't support the get." So that's as expected. Now this one is just a small, simple payload where we're just sending in that post on that endpoint with that path. The content is application/JSON. So this is exactly the kind of thing that we want to check with the JSON threat protection policy. So let's send that one in. And you can see over on the right-hand side, it says, hey, status was okay. We got an HTTP 200 okay status, and we got the canned result saying, yeah, that was okay. We passed all the checks. So let's look at some violations. The first is maybe the identifier exceeds the limit, and I think we set 15 in that policy. So when I send that in, we should see, yep, there's a threat protection, and it's giving us information. You exceeded the object name length limit that was specified. Or another example would be more than 5 entries at one level. So let's send that in, and sure enough, we get a different response on that one. That's saying, you know, you've got a violation for that as well. If we look at the container depth, we can send that in. we can send in a request to check the container depth, and we get a message similarly that's saying, hey, container depth is the problem here. An array length limit, so here's an array with 5 elements, very simple array. When I send that in, it's going to say, oh, you got too many items in your array. And then, of course, the value, the string length limit, we'll send that in, and we'll get a similar message over there saying your string value is a little too long. So that illustrates the JSON threat protection policy. Now, what you'll notice is the fault that gets sent back to the caller is pretty verbose, and it's telling the caller exactly what the name of the policy was and where it found the violation and the source of the check, all of which you may or may not want to relay back to the caller. The way you would grab this fault and handle it and perhaps replace the message with a different message, something maybe more generic or less transparent, you would use fault rules. Fault rules is a key capability inside the Apigee API Proxy, and it's outside the scope of this quick screencast, but if you're interested in looking at that, you can Google for fault rules, and you'll learn all about how to handle faults and suppress these messages or replace these messages with something a little more appropriate for your purposes. All right, so that's it. That is the JSON threat protection policy in Apigee X and hybrid. That's how it works. Till next time, keep it digital.